We are back yet again on the thiccmaninc podcast to give you our Week 10 record predictions for the 2022 NFL season. And as always, the Thursday night game will have been played prior to this video's publication, but it will not have been played prior to its recording. So we are going to go ahead and fire off that prediction. And look, I love the scrappy Carolina Panthers as much as the next side. PJ Walker is my hero. DJ Moore knows what he's doing, leading the tank operations by taking his helmet off, but they're not beating the Falcons. The Falcons are a borderline functional team. They're one game under 500, and this is going to be the game which puts them at the top of the NFC South. Gives them the edge. Mariota will do just enough to beat the Panthers. Their defense is horrible. Their offense is horrible. The Falcons have decent receiving weapons. They've got a functional backfield, particularly when you factor in Mariota's ability to get done on the ground. And their defense a little bit underrated. Not particularly good, but not particularly horrible. And not particularly horrible is enough to beat the Panthers. So I'm giving this one to an easy Atlanta win.
Well, their defense isn't that great. It is well below average. And their offense is actually on the higher end of the league as far as what they've been able to produce this season. And the Panthers just got ran off the field by the Bengals. Joe Mixon having one of the greatest fantasy football games of all time, 6th when it comes to PPR for running backs. And for the Falcons, Cordarrelle Patterson is finally back. He made his return last week with 2 touchdowns, and on the season, he's averaging 5.4 yards a carry, better than what the other 2 Atlanta running backs are. I think it's 4.5 and 4.7 yards respectively, which isn't horrible, but when you get your best running back back, and you're a running team with a quarterback that can also produce on the ground, and you're playing the worst, maybe second worst team in the NFL, right next to the Houston Texans, it is going to be a good matchup for you, and it should be a relatively easy game. And they're also finally targeting Kyle Pitts more and getting him more involved in the offense. So with Cordarrelle Patterson finally healthy, returned last week, with a combination of the Panthers seemingly rolling out a different quarterback every single week, Baker Mayfield played at the end of last week's game, it should be a relatively easy win for the Falcons.
I'm glad you brought Baker Mayfield up because he is the one wild card. He came in that second half, put up 3 touchdown drives, 2 touchdowns individually, marched them right down the field, got his team a rushing touchdown. And maybe if he plays that way the entire game, maybe if he starts the entire game, he leads 6 touchdown drives, and it's a much more competitive game. So Baker Mayfield, former Sooner, first overall pick, he might have a little bit something left in the tank. So if he starts and gets clicking, that is the only chance the Panthers have. Do I think it's likely to happen? No, but I gotta mention it. On to London. And we've got a scrumptious matchup between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Seattle Sea Chickens. And while the Seahawks may be on fire this year, they're going to fly all the way from windy old Seattle to London. On the other end, the Buccaneers, much shorter flight from Florida to London. And then you factor in the Brady divorce situation, undefeated since he actually got divorced. And I don't think this is much of a bold prediction when I say the Buccaneers are going to thrash the Seahawks. Geno Smith's good, their receivers are great, their running backs functional. Their defense getting a little bit better, but still, the Buccaneers are going to win this game due to the strength of Tom Brady, his marital issues, the passing game, and hopefully a healthy Mike Evans, who appears to be fully practicing.
Well, the easy prediction, I'm sure one that a lot of people are going to be rolling with, which it seems like you're rolling with, but you didn't quite mention this point, is the fact that Tom Brady finally seemed to be back in the last drive against the Rams last week, pulling it out when it seemed like the game was over. I certainly had thought the game was over. I left the restaurant I was at because the Rams had the ball back running out the clock, and then Tom Brady gets the ball back with no timeouts and finds a way to win. But that is not going to happen. The Buccaneers offense is horrific. It's one of the worst scoring offenses in the NFL. The only time it has been producing at a high level was maybe week 1 of the season when they played the Cowboys, who have an elite pass rush, and put up only 19 points then, or maybe against the Chiefs, but that game was also never very close. So when you're playing the Seahawks, who are significantly more dynamic on the offensive side of the ball and have one of the best scoring offenses in the NFL, and their defense has only given up 16.5 points a game over the last 4 weeks, it is not a good matchup for you. So the Seahawks are the better team basically all around, and at the end of the game, Tom Brady is going to be left contemplating life, why he came back for another season just to lose to Geno Smith, who
we're not going to sit here and disrespect Geno Smith. Geno Smith is a top 10 quarterback this season, is slowly creeping his way to top 5. He is playing very well. Yes, the season we are currently in, 9 weeks through, Geno Smith's a top 10 quarterback, without a doubt. Certainly a top 10 fantasy quarterback. So we're not going, he lost to Geno Smith. Geno Smith's fucking real, man. I will not sit here and have you disrespect the West Virginia Proc, the first round pick, the man who had his jaw shattered and still returned to play. We're not going to do that. I have many things I can do in my day, but one of them is not going to be.
I'm not disrespecting him, but do you think that Tom Brady, when he has Super Bowl aspirations heading into the season, a rumor on the street, he got divorced because he went back for another year. Do you think he's not contemplating life a little bit if he goes out and loses a game handily to Geno Smith. Do you not think that irks him a little bit?
I mean, I think he contemplated life anyway. The Geno Smith part feels unnecessary. Like, oh man, I lost to one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Darn, no, it's just that I lost. Lumping Geno Smith in there is hateful. You are a hateful individual at Geno Smith for no reason.
I don't hate him.
For no reason. And there is no reason anyone should be picking the Minnesota Vikings to go into Buffalo and beat the Bills. I know Josh Allen's hurt. I know his arm thing, whatever. It's uncertain if he's going to play or not. What is certain, though, is the Vikings' weapons, namely Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson, are used to playing in nice, warm weather. They play in a dome. They played at LSU and in Florida for college. They're used to it being toasty. They're not going to be able to go into the snow of Buffalo and put up elite numbers. Certainly not when Kirk Cousins, one of the worst quarterbacks in the league when facing teams above 500, is giving them the ball. Their offense is going to be repugnant. As for the Bills, even if they don't have Josh Allen, they've still got Stephon Diggs, they've still got Gabe Davis. Their running game's emerging with the second Cook brother, and I think they'd be able to do just enough, like maybe 14 points. And 14 points would be enough to beat this terrible Vikings offense against a good team, against a good defense in the snow. Now, if Josh Allen plays, completely different story altogether. They run rampant on the Vikings, not much of a conversation, but I'm guaranteeing a Bills win regardless.
The self-hatred just needs to stop, and this kind of feels like a role reversal from a season ago, and when you would have to be the one to convince me that certain aspects of the Giants were maybe better than some people gave it credit for. The Vikings are a good football team, and I don't understand why you hate your favorite team, why you hate the fact that they're 7-1.
Because Kirk Cousins is their quarterback.
They have solid victories. If I were you, and I was a fan of this
Where's the solid
team,
victory?
they're 7-1. This whole thing I hate about calling teams frauds because they have that many wins. That makes every single NFL team a fraud because there's a lot more teams that have more than one loss than the Vikings, and the Vikings' loss is to the only undefeated team left in the
only good team they played.
Whatever you want to say. If I were in your position, I would be happy. You have a quarterback who's very good in 1 p.m. games. You have an elite running back. You have an elite receiver. You have an average to above average defense. There's nothing horrible about the Vikings. Maybe the only horrible thing is Kirk Cousins in primetime games, and this is not a primetime game. You're playing the Buffalo Bills, who have Josh Allen, who injured his throwing elbow just last week. He probably is going to struggle throwing the ball if he's even playing. And then is he going to risk running the ball and injuring his elbow even more, taking on more hits? So if he even plays, it's going to be a diminished performance. And if he doesn't play, the Bills are like a lost puppy when they don't have Josh Allen leading the way. They just got beat by the Jets. So the Vikings are going to win this game because they're competent in basically every facet of football. So I don't really see a way the Vikings lose this one.
1, they're very average. 2, again, you didn't even address the skill players used to playing in warm climates. Justin Jefferson does not play well when it's cold outside. I did a little bit of research. I familiarized myself with the nomenclature. And speaking of the nomenclature, you are clearly unfamiliar with the Kirk Cousins literature. While he is very functional in 1 p.m. games, he struggles tremendously when playing teams well above 500, which the Bills at the moment are. I think that outweighs the 1 p.m. stats. The analytics and data show I am right.
I would agree with you if the Josh Allen was also didn't have an injury to his throwing arm, and we don't even know if he's playing.
Last year when the Vikings hosted the Dallas Cowboys with Cooper Rush in what was supposed to be a sure thing, slam dunk, easy victory game, and then got humiliated, scored 14 points with a better defense playing them right now this week than that crappy Dallas team of last year? Kirk Cousins is the same guy.
Cooper Rush has more wins than losses as a starting quarterback in the NFL.
I don't care. Cooper Rush is a bum. His name's Cooper. No good players besides Cooper Kupp have that name. Look, this is going to get very cyclical, back and forth over and over again. The Vikings are not winning this game, barring some act of God where the ground suddenly melts itself of snow so they can have a clear, easy passing attack. It's just not happening.
God forbid Isaiah enjoys a victory and his team being good.
The Vikings will probably be happy as long as it's against Josh Allen, but again, it's not happening. So, also, Josh Allen would definitely risk injuring himself to run the ball. You see how that man carries himself.
Then the rest of the Bills season will be over.
Quite possibly. Anywho, on to the Windy City, which will not have the same weather conditions, but will still not be a particularly pleasant place to play for the Detroit Lions. The Bears have seemingly caught fire in recent weeks, and while the Lions do have an impressive win over the Packers, and impressive is in big air quotes here, but still, they gotta win. The Bears gotta win. It's 2 good teams going at each other. At least 2 teams with momentum going at each other. Certainly not good, but functional at the bare minimum. I'm gonna give this one to the Bears, though. Justin Fields is emerging right now. He's playing very well. If he continues that, which I think he will against Detroit's somewhat lackluster defense, the Bears will win. It's simple as that. Now, if the Lions somehow manage to slow him down, hinder him in any way, shape, or form, they'll have the edge because the Bears' offense is nothing without Fields. But I don't see that happening, so I'm gonna give this one to the Bears.
Well, the Bears did lose last week. They didn't win, and the Lions did win last week, but the Lions' win was more indicative of how bad the Packers Packers are, how lackluster the Packers defense is, how weak the Packers are at wide receiver, and just how not put together the Packers are as an organization. And the Bears, they did lose to the Dolphins, but there was a bad non-defensive pass interference call late in the game where if the Packers get it, they probably win. And the Dolphins are one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. The thing that makes the Bears so special is their run game. They have the number one rushing offense in the NFL by over 200 total yards. They're better than the Ravens with Lamar Jackson. That's just how good the Bears are, with Justin Fields leading the way and Khalil Herbert and David Montgomery built off of that. Then they also did that to the Dolphins, who coming into that week had a top 10 rushing defense. Now they're playing the Lions, who have the second worst rushing defense in the NFL, are giving up 160 rushing yards a game, and they have to play the Bears, who almost have 200 rushing yards a game. So this should be a relatively easy win. I wouldn't be shocked if the Bears run for 350 yards, and we're going to have another piece of the pie to show why Justin Fields is capable of being an elite quarterback in the NFL.
Well, I'll get back to something you started this little monologue or diatribe with. The Packers defense played fine. They gave up 15 points and lost the game. So let's not start slandering anyone in that Green Bay organization besides the big cheese himself, who keeps contemplating retirement and being cryptic for the sake of being cryptic. Aaron stinks right now is why the Packers lost. It's not anything else.
Well, giving up 15 points to the Lions, what was it, 1-win Lions at the time? It's never a good look.
15 points in 2022, man. Get off their case. It's Rodgers. I don't know why you like him all of a sudden. But I agree, I don't think the Bears are going to be able to run away with the game by virtue of the clock always staying moving. I think it's going to be fairly low scoring. I'd be surprised if one of these teams broke 30 points, if we're being honest. But hey, if they do, good for them. We both picked the Bears, though. On to Arrowhead Stadium, where we see the Jaguars visiting the Kansas City Chiefs. This game is not going to be too complicated. Trevor Lawrence has showed flashes, but still is not that guy yet. Jackson Mahomes is still going to be on the sideline supporting his brother, who is in fact that guy. The Chiefs' offense is balanced, best tight end in football, yada, yada, yada. Not much needs to go into this. The Chiefs are winning this one.
Yeah, the Jaguars are the most disappointing, or one of the most, I should say, disappointing teams in the NFL this season. When you consider the fact they made significant improvement with their head coaching hire, they made significant improvement in the roster on the offensive and defense side of the ball, and Trevor Lawrence is in year 2. He should be, the roster with him in year 2, it being improved, they should be much better than they are. They've lost to the Commanders, Texans, Colts, and Broncos this season. All 4 horrific teams. So when you're losing to these teams, and you've made improvements everywhere, there's no sign that you are anywhere close to being capable of competing with the Chiefs. Isaiah said everything good about the Chiefs already. The Chiefs will handle the Jaguars in this one. Patrick Mahomes is probably going to throw for 350 yards, 4 touchdowns. It's going to be a blowout.
Not a particularly close game by any stretch of the imagination. On to the wonderful city of Miami. And this one's not too complicated either. The Browns have a somewhat average pass defense. Not bad, not good, middle of the pack. Their offense, Nick Chubb's the engine. Behind him, all things go. But the Dolphins are just electric. Hill, Waddle, Gesicki, Tua. It's a thing of beauty. And that beauty will continue. Tua is undefeated when he starts and finishes a game, and that will not change in Miami this weekend. The Dolphins are going to air out the Browns. But the Browns have some sauce. There's some chance they still scrape their way into the playoffs. They've done just enough to keep their head above water for old Deshaun Watson to make his triumphant return in a few weeks. But right now, the Dolphins triumph.
The Dolphins have the most dynamic weapons in the NFL. If another team is lucky enough to have a corner capable of covering Tyreek Hill, it seems like Denzel Ward may be back this week, even though I don't think there's anyone really truly capable of stopping Tyreek. Then they still have to cover Jalen Waddle, who's possibly the second fast receiver in the NFL and good at everything else that comes with being a receiver. Catching, running routes, going over the top, running over the middle, short. He can do everything. He can run the ball if you need him to. Same as Tyreek. And the Browns don't have the defense to stop that. And when it comes to the Browns' strength, the way they've been winning games through Nick Chubb, the Dolphins just faced off against the best rushing attack in the NFL, and they are not going to be able to do what the Bears did because Jacoby Brissett is not nearly as dynamic as Justin Fields is on the ground with his feet. So I don't see a way for the Browns to win this one. They're not as good as the Bears rushing the ball, and the Bears weren't even able to pull out a victory either. So I think the Dolphins pull out the victory. It shouldn't be that close with how good the Dolphins have been with Tua, Tyreek, and Waddle all on the field together.
It's appropriate Miami is by the water because they do love boat racing teams. If they get at it early, it's no shot. The Browns are not making a comeback in this one at all. On to the windy city, the rainy, dreary, miserable city of New Jersey, which is not by the water. But the Giants are facing off against the Houston Texans. And this game seems like a slim dunk pick for the Giants. They're a winning team coming off the bye, whatever. The Texans have a very good running back in Dameon Pierce, one of the best in the league, certainly one of the best fantasy producers this year. He will be going up against the Giants' lackluster run defense. They're bottom 10 in rushing yards allowed. They struggle. They can get gouged on the ground. They're not amazing at tackling. They are top 10 in most yards allowed after contact. That could be an issue. Am I still going to pick the Giants? Yes. They've got Saquon Barkley, who's showing why he was one of the premier backs in the league, who someone like Dameon Pierce wants to be like when he gets older, and who is going to run rampant on the horrible Texans defense. But I think this game will be a little bit closer than most people are expecting. All in all, I'm giving it to the Giants, though.
Well, pointing out the Giants' run defense with failing to point out specifically the Texans' run defense is a bit of the miss, and the Giants are incredibly unlucky coming off of the bye. They are somehow more injured than when they entered the bye. Xavier McKinney hurt his hand while on vacation in Mexico, I believe it was. So somehow the Giants keep getting extremely unlucky when it comes to injuries. Now their secondary loses another body. But for this game, the Texans are still worse at pretty much every single position except number one receiver if Brandon Cooks plays. And then when you take a look at the run game, the Texans have given up 180 yards per game rushing thus far, which would be worst all time in a single season. And the Giants have Saquon Barkley. They've proven this season they are capable of running the football. So Saquon is salivating at this opportunity, and I wouldn't be shocked if he puts up 200 rushing yards this game. The Giants are going to win off the back of Saquon's performance.
I completely agree with that. I just wouldn't be surprised if Dameon Pierce puts up 180 to go alongside him. Also, Mexico is a very dangerous place to ride four-wheelers if you're an NFL star, risking being out for the season, but hey, to each their own. Everyone's allowed to make their own decisions, even if they are incredibly stupid. Speaking of stupid decisions, the Pittsburgh Steelers still have no identity at quarterback and look like they are tanking for the first overall pick, which unfortunately will not quite be able to pull off and will be stuck with Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky. They're facing the lackluster New Orleans Saints with Michael Thomas, who seems to be out forever, with Alvin Kamara, who is still facing the assault charges but appears to be on the field, and with a quarterback situation which can best be described as tragic. It's a bad game. This is not going to be particularly entertaining. The only saving grace is the Steelers defense might get a little bit active if Watt comes back. If not, this game is going to be a snooze fest, one you only see bits and pieces of on NFL Red Zone. It's going to be like a 13-10 affair. No one's really going to score that much, and I'll give the nod to the Steelers just because they're the home team, but this game's going to stink. Both these offenses stink. Both the defenses are lackluster if they're missing stars.
Well, I wouldn't call the Saints offense lackluster. They have still been scoring points at a respectable clip this season, despite all of their injuries. And heading into I do agree it's probably going to be boring. Whether the Saints put up 30 points, it's somehow still going to find a way to be a boring game. And the Steelers, their offense is abysmal, and their defense is not as good as it's been in the past. But who would have thought in 2022, Andy Dalton would be the best quarterback on the field when the other team is also rolling out their best option? That's something you don't really expect heading into the season. Now, the Saints have better offensive weapons. Chris Olave has been very good all season. Alvin Kamara has been on the field and very good all season. Taysom Hill is probably going to break off another 50-yard run against this Steelers defense that's not all that great. So I think it's a relatively easy win for the Saints. They have the better offense, they have an offensive identity, and they're more dynamic on the offensive side of the ball, where the Steelers haven't really been able to score many points at all this season, whether it's Kenny Pickett or Trubisky at quarterback.
I mean, I sort of agree with this. Saints offense is better. I don't mean to disrespect those fellas down there in gold. I'm making my prediction solely on the fact that Watt coming back will be enough to revitalize his Steelers defense. He's optimistic about returning on Sunday. If not, yeah, it's definitely going to be a Saints win. But if he's on the field, I'm giving it to the Steelers. He's just such an absolute force. We saw that week 1, and we will see that every time he sets foot on the field. There's a reason his single season sack record. He is an absolute stud and can change a game by himself. Speaking of men who can change a game by themselves, Derrick Henry is set to take on Russell Wilson and the Broncos' lackluster but slowly gaining steam offense. Now, the real question is, if King Henry can feast, how heavily is he going to consume? Is he going to indulge? Is he going to overeat? Or is he going to show moderation? If he shows moderation, has 100, 120 rushing yards, I think the Broncos' offense will be able to do just enough to get him the win. But if he does King Henry things, if he runs rampant, if he has 150 yards, paired touchdowns, maybe even a passing touchdown if he's feeling exotic, that will get the Titans a win. I'm inclined to say he'll do that. Derrick Henry is an absolute freak of nature who I always bet on, who I always draft in fantasy, and who I enjoy watching more than any other running back in the league besides maybe Christian McCaffrey. So I'm going to give this to the Titans, even though they're not that well-rounded of a team, but their focus point, their focal point, their run game,
Now, while I may have been wrong about calling the Titans a bad team, I am going to double down on them being a mediocre team, and I don't really care. I'm not going to take into account the fact that they took the Chiefs to overtime. Their passing attack, whether it be Ryan Tannehill or Malik Willis, is absolutely abysmal because they probably have, which not a lot of people have acknowledged, the worst receiving core in the NFL. It's Robert Woods, Nikhil Westbrook, and I don't even know who the third option is. So they have no passing game, and of course they do have Derrick Henry. Their running game is the best certainly in this game and one of the best in the NFL. But when your passing attack is that weak and you're going against a defense who has one of the best scoring defenses in the NFL, I think this opens up the opportunity for the Broncos to actually get a win. It feels like a trap game where a lot of people are going to predict the Titans to win because they brought the Chiefs to overtime, and then they're playing the Broncos with Russell Wilson, who has been struggling. But the Broncos are coming off of a bye, and their defense is still very good. I think the game winds up being, 15-13, and the Titans lose.
You're also not taking into account the fact the Titans have given up more than 22 points only once this year, of course being when they got boat raced by the Bills the opening week. They're a very good defense. The Titans are underrated on that front. They've had some injuries, which ultimately cost them some star players. Still, they have bounced back well. They're a very good defense. I just can't imagine the Broncos moving the ball in this team at all, I'll be honest. Who knows? Maybe Russell Wilson saying Broncos country, let's ride 18,000 times during the bye week. He's going to turn the team around. People will have faith in him all of a sudden. It's going to be fantastic. Let's sing Kumbaya and suddenly be the best offense in the league. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they're going to be a good offense. I think they're going to be the worst offense moving forward because Russ is just not that guy. Titans are going to win this game.
The Titans also have the worst passing offense in the NFL. So with how good the Broncos defense is, that completely eliminates their pass game. And then they're going to solely rely on Derrick Henry, which isn't impossible. And also the Broncos offense is really bad. But to me, it just feels like a game that the Broncos are going to find a way to win.
You also got to take into account that the reason their passing offense is so bad in some capacities is because they run the ball pretty much every single time. The attempts are just not there to make the passing attack pop. But I digress. Moving on to the wonderful city of Las Vegas, we see the Colts, helmed by their new head coach and former UNC football player, taking on the Las Vegas Raiders, a team which has disappointed everyone and will continue to disappoint everyone. And I'm going to be bold. I'm going to be brave. I'm going to say Sam Ehlinger wins this game, wins the first game of his young career. I'm going to pick the upset. Why? I don't know. I'm just doing it. I'm dynamic. I'm ballsy. My knees are wide on my squat. They don't come in together. I'm built different. And for that reason alone, I am picking the Raiders to lose to the Indianapolis Colts and their revitalized offense.
There is no way in hell I'm picking the Colts to win a football game the rest of this season with Jeff Saturday coaching this team and their 30-year-old now offensive coordinator. I don't think they know what they're doing. I think this is another situation where when they were sucking for luck. I don't know what you want to call it this year, but they are trying to be bad at
Blowing
this point.
for Bryce.
What?
Blowing for Bryce or suffering for Stroud.
Anyway, by all accounts, besides the fact that Jeff Saturday has NFL experience as a player, his only coaching experience is at the high school level, and I don't even know if he's all that great of a high school coach. So I don't really see a way how on a week's notice he can lead this team to a victory, even though he's playing the Raiders, who Mike McDaniels also should be fired. But Mike McDaniels has been involved in Super Bowls from a coaching perspective and not a high school Friday night matchup. So the Raiders should win this one. They're more talented, and their coach somehow is the better coach also.
Imagine your high school team goes like 5-5 as an average game, gets bounced the first round of the playoffs, and like 2 weeks later you hear the news, hey, yeah, our coach got a new job. Oh man, really? Where? At the rival high school? He's a assistant coach at some college somewhere? No, he's coaching the Colts.
It doesn't make
Jared
sense.
Rolfes going from Northwest Gilbert to the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I know Jeff Saturday's better than Jared Rolfes. We don't need to get into that.
I have no information on how good of a coach he was, but the Colts were a sloppy mess before they fired Frank Reich, who I think is a decent NFL head coach, and they're going to be even sloppier mess this week.
Jeff Saturday's getting the locker room going, though. You have so little faith. You and your lackluster 10-point favorite prediction. Puh. Speaking of picking the favorite, the Cowboys are about to go smash the Green Bay Packers. Bakhtiari's getting sick of Rodgers' cryptic Twitter, Instagram, MySpace post. He's not going to block Micah Parsons too much. He's going to take it easy on the All-Pro. The All-Pro is going to rip Aaron Rodgers' head off. The Packers offense is going to score about 12 points. And Dak Prescott, despite his many limitations, is going to be able to find Zeke, Pollard, and CeeDee just enough to get them over that 12-point threshold. This game is going to be a defensive battle, and the Packers will lose that despite doing the best they can because Aaron Rodgers is a bum, a fraud, and a loser, and should probably go back to ayahuasca country country in South America.
If the Packers can't beat the Lions for one of the worst defenses in the NFL, newsflash, they are really going to struggle when they're playing the best pass rush in the NFL, and Dak Prescott is finally back leading the way on offense for the Cowboys. So it will take an incredible amount of magic from Aaron Rodgers harnessing some of his past performances against the Dallas Cowboys in order for them to win this one. There's nowhere on the Packers roster they have an advantage on the Cowboys. The Cowboys pass rush is elite. Their offense is now going to take another step forward with hopefully Tony Pollard being the primary back and Dak Prescott is back. There's not that much else to say. The Cowboys are just better.
On to the next game. And I don't know if you've seen this video, Tristan, but something recently surfaced of DeAndre Hopkins yelling at little Kyler Murray, asking him where he was looking. And Lord knows he was probably looking at the back plate of his offensive line because that man's eyes are low to the ground. But the Cardinals have been in real trouble recently. Sure, Diop being back helps. The reason they're not losing by 30 instead of losing by about 10. They've got some offensive identity, but it's not enough. Kyler Murray's been terrible. He's 0-2 since the new Call of Duty game came out. He can't find his receivers. One of the best receivers in the NFL, DeAndre Hopkins, is getting frustrated, and there's clear tension within that organization. On the other sideline, there's Sean McVay, who's probably going to retire any week now. Aaron Donald, who is still doing Aaron Donald-ish things. Jalen Ramsey, who looks completely washed. Cooper Kupp, who's the only target. And Matthew Stafford, whose arm doesn't work. It's a battle of the worst here. Neither of these teams is going to win the NFC West this year, but I had to pick one. I'll side with the Super Bowl champions. Now, while the LA crowd is very fickle, I am sure the Arizona crowd is more fickle. They're not coming all the way from Arizona to LA to watch this game. It's finally going to be a good home game for the Rams, and due to the crowd noise, due to a little bit of improvement, a little cultivation, Stafford's finally going to be able to connect with all his receivers, not just Kupp, and deliver them a victory.
See, this is where you're wrong, and it sucks for both teams because the rest of their season hinges on this game. Whichever team falls to 3-7, they don't have much of a chance at crawling out of that hole and somehow finding their way to the playoffs. I don't really see a way out of it for the loser. Now, it was devastating for the Rams last week when they were unable to pull out the victory against the Buccaneers because they had that game won. And at a certain point, we have to acknowledge the Rams' offense is not changing. Their offensive line is still really bad. Allen Robinson is never going to turn the corner and start having a productive season. And Sean McVay, he doesn't seem to be able to figure out a way to get the offense to go. Cooper Kupp is still the only one producing, and Matt Stafford hasn't really accelerated his production from what we saw at the end of last season. So the Rams offense is not good. And then on the Cardinals side of things, their offense has really started to turn the corner with DeAndre Hopkins back. They've put up 42, 26, and 21 points over the last 3 weeks. Pretty respectable. It's better than what the Rams have been doing offensively. So I think the Cardinals are actually going to find a way to win this game with Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. The Rams offense they don't seem to be able to keep up with anyone anymore.
You clearly have not seen the video of Diop screaming at little Kyler Murray. I think there's a lot going on there which we're not seeing. I think the coaching situation's whack, there's no leader in that clubhouse, and it's resulting in infighting. I just can't pick a team which is infighting to beat anybody, particularly a team which, although is struggling, has a lot of high-end talent. Speaking of high-end talent, both these teams we're going to talk about now for the Sunday night game are loaded with it. I'd honestly give the edge to the 49ers, so the Chargers are right there behind them. At least they would be if they could manage to get all their players on the field. Obviously, they lost one of the best tackles in football in Slater. Their receiving core being as uncertain as it is hindering Herbert's success a great deal. On the other sideline, though, you've got the 49ers, who strolled early, but now are starting to turn things around. And particularly since they got old CMC, I think this team is completely different. They are finally utilizing all their weapons. Their offense looks rounded. The passing attack's still not superb, but it's doing enough and is opening up enough for the run game to really dominate. For that reason, I'm going to pick the 49ers to win this Sunday night game. Chargers are going to drop out of the number 1 seed, or out of the number 2 seed. No, they're still going to be in there, actually. The Chargers are going to drop out the first wild card seed in the AFC, and really, they need to turn their season around after this game, or it's going to be a long offseason after missing the playoffs. I think they can do it, but right now, the 49ers have this one.
If the Chargers were healthy, I definitely would pick them to win just because of how dynamic Justin Herbert is, but Joshua Palmer is still their number 1 receiver, and their offensive line is still one of the worst in the NFL due to losing Rashawn Slater earlier in the season. And on the 49ers side of the ball, all their superstars are actually healthy. Christian McCaffrey's healthy, Deebo's healthy, George Kittle's healthy, Brandon Ayuk has been a very good wide receiver, and Jimmy G has been serviceable. Then when you take into account, the 49ers have one of the best defenses in the NFL. The Chargers' depleted offense does not stand much of a chance. The 49ers' talent is all healthy, the Chargers' talent isn't healthy, and the 49ers have a serviceable quarterback. They're going to win this game. I don't really see a way the Chargers can overcome all the injuries they've sustained on offense and defense with Joey Bosa still out.
Serviceable really is the best way to describe Jimmy Garoppolo. Anywho, on to the final game of the week, the Monday night game between the Eagles, who are hosting the Washington Commanders. And look, I love Taylor Heinicke as much as the next guy. I'll never give up on Chase Young being an amazing pass rusher, but this one's going with the Eagles. It's not going to be close. Their offense is too dynamic. Their rushing attack is amazing. Their passing game is slept on by me, one of the best in the league. With Brown, with Smith, they're going to gash the Washington secondary over and over again, only for Jalen Hurts to scamper in the end zone for a few touchdowns. Not going to be a close game. Heineke's going to do his best to respond, but when you're fighting with Scary Terry and not much else, you really have so much you can do.
The Eagles have the better quarterback. They have the better wide receivers. They have the better offensive line. They have the better tight end. They have the better front seven. They have the better secondary. They have the better kicker. The Eagles are better everywhere. The only argument you can make that the game is going to be close is that it is an NFC East rivalry, and the NFC East rivalries are weird. Sometimes the team that's significantly worse finds a way to keep the game close, but the talent gap between these two rosters is so significant, and the coaching gap at this point, I'd say, is so significant that there isn't really a path to victory for the Commanders. I don't really see a way the Commanders can win this game. And brief note, for the people that call the Eagles fraudulent, I hate that. I said it earlier in this podcast, every single team would be fraudulent then. The Bills just lost to the Jets without Breece Hall. The Chiefs lost to the Colts earlier in the season. The Ravens have 3 losses. If you want to call the Eagles frauds, then there's an argument to me that every single team's a fraud. I hate it, but the Eagles are winning this one.
I don't quite understand the Joey Sly slander. He's a better kicker than whoever the Eagles are going to trot out, but I do agree with you to a certain extent. But you're wrong, the Eagles are frauds. Oh, it feels good to say that. It really does. Indulge in it for just a second. Say, wait, the Eagles are frauds. You can do it.
You're wrong.
The only team which isn't a fraud, in my opinion, is the Dolphins, who are undefeated if two actually plays the entire game. If he gets concussed, they're back to being frauds, but only one remains. Anyway, that was the podcast, the predictions. Let us know what you think down in the comments below. Come back to the video after the fact and tell us everything we got wrong, and we'll talk to you later.
See ya!